Smile on your face, wake up laughing, 'cause you're free of all the things that would hold you from your ocean view. Life's a landscape, why don't you paint it your way? Don't you wanna live carefree, miles from the rat race?
Dwayne Forrest.
Never gets old.
He is a blooming good talent, isn't he?
He really is.
Beautiful voice.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you, Dwayne, for donating your time, your talent, your words, your music, and that massive smile of yours. Peace and love, bro. Hey.
Hello.
It's our first episode.
It is indeed. And thank you for joining us. Welcome to the How to Die Happy podcast. It is our first episode.
It is. Hello, everybody. And likewise, thanks from me. So How to Die Happy, bringing you stories and practical utilities for the arts of living and dying well. Living and dying well. Discuss.
Living and dying well, indeed.
What do you think about that?
I love it. I think it's great. I hope people will get something out of it. So thank you, folks, for your precious time. We know you have lots of options when it comes to podcasts. We hope. What do we hope, Martin?
Well, I suppose what we hope we can do is bring together loads of modalities and methodologies from people all around the world, arguably far more smart than you and I, Christopher. Certainly far more qualified.
Far more qualified indeed. Definitely far more qualified.
To discuss stuff about life and about well-being, particularly well-being. So the common thread in this whole thing is around the 10 common deathbed regrets. And the intention for us and for our guests and the collective of amazing people who have come around, like literally just gravitated towards this mad idea very quickly, I might add.
Indeed.
Too quickly.
Too quickly for some of us in this room.
For the producer. I think the collective intention is that we can just help people consider some ways, some opportunities to reframe, to maybe unlearn, maybe to heal, methodologies around awareness. But it's not just about the mind, it's about the mind, the body, and the spirit. You know, one of the, I think the number one top, I'm not sure if these are prioritized in reality, but one of the top 10 deathbed regrets is I wish I'd taken better care of my body. Mm-hmm. So we're going to cover that too at some point with some people. It's never ending, this thing, I mean, what we're trying to do here. So,
well, it is a journey. It is our journey, and we welcome you to join us on this journey, and we want you to be part of it. So we've got our first episode. Who do we have, Martin, for our first episode?
We have a wonderful man based in London by the name of Liam Farquhar, and Liam is a legal psychedelic guide. I think obviously it's nice to be able to say that. It's good for him to be able to say that. I think that sort of strips out some of the wonder around what he does. I would like to say he's more like a modern day shaman. Not sure how he'd feel about that. In fact, I did say this, didn't I?
You did.
I'm not sure how he felt about it.
I don't know how he felt about it either. I think that he's a very humble guy, and he very much believes in the idea that he is there to support an individual in healing themselves.
Truth. But then that's what a shaman does.
It is
as well.
what a shaman does. So I think it's perfectly accurate to call him a modern day shaman.
Yeah. So, and what does Liam do? He works with psychedelics, guiding people of all walks of life, having experienced all manner of trauma, from major trauma to micro traumas, and he helps them to heal themselves. So what did we discuss in the show then? Because we did lots of stuff.
We did. We discussed trauma. Obviously, that was the kind of the theme of the show. Mm-hmm. We discussed the importance of setting the right kind of intentions when you go into a therapeutic setting like this. Mm-hmm. He talked about the distinction between healing and him being very careful to frame this as a healing experience, as opposed to, I forget exactly how he characterized it. But
well, I think he was keen to say at no point in any of this do we say, we're going to heal you.
Right.
I'm going to heal you.
Right.
Because rightly so, he identifies that everybody's journey has been different. Everybody's journey to get here is different, but everybody's journey with plant medicines is different as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess he was super humble about that in a nice, respectful way. But what else did we talk about? Oh, we also talked about the rise, this sudden, apparent exponential rise in interest and in regulation, but also in acceptance of psychedelics.
Yes.
In psychological treatment and therapy.
Yeah. And the potential pitfalls, let's say, or downsides to large corporations getting involved with this. And I think what I really appreciated about Liam, and we talk about this in the show, is his ability to see both sides of it. He framed it in the case of two extremes, the one being the hippies and the other being the capitalists, to simplify this. And he said he can see, pros to both. So anyway, I thought it was a great way that he framed that, and willing to explore the nuance in psychedelics being more mainstream, so to speak.
Yeah. And the final thing I recall we discussed was the importance through this whole thing of finding the right guide.
Yes.
Which one could say about any healing, unlearning, or self-awareness, personal development journey, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So, I really enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed it too. It was a great first episode. I think it's a great introduction to the show. I think it's a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts, and one that we wish to share with people. So what do you think? You want to jump into it?
I reckon we just jump into it. So we hope you enjoy the first episode of How to Die Happy. If you don't, listen to a couple more before you sack us off.
We'll also have little what we're calling chin wags in between the interview episodes. So if you're not keen on the episodes, maybe check out the chin wags. Bonus material.
Well, I guess if you're not ready for an hour and a half of listening to he and I chatting to leading authorities on in the territory of well-being, then you can dip your toe in the water with a 10, 15, 20-minute chin wag, which will be I don't know what we're going to do with them. We're just going to pepper the week with them, maybe.
Yeah.
We're making it up as we go along, aren't we?
We are making it up as we go along. And for people that don't know what a chin wag is, I was one of them up until 2 days ago, because the Brits have their own jargon. I think I need a dictionary hanging out with Martin sometimes. A chin wag is literally your chin moving, which means we're just talking.
Esatto.
With some funny, interesting, maybe introspective topics. We'll see. But regardless, episode 1, Liam Farquhar, psychedelic therapist?
Guide.
I think it's fair to say. Psychedelic guide.
And therapist.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here we go.
Enjoy.
Episode 1, How to Die Happy podcast. Let us know what you think.
And I do, psychedelic integration. So helping people understand, process, get lessons and insights from an intentional psychedelic experience, and helping them kind of embed those into their lives moving forward. And I also do the guiding as well. So I'm a psychedelic therapist guide, and I bring people through a whole process that requires active participation before, during, after. So working with psilocybin mushrooms, doing the prep before and the integration after in London or on Zoom, and then having the experience itself in Amsterdam where psilocybin is legal.
Do you when people get in touch with you, Liam, do you have to do a bit of a job holding their hands to talk to them about psilocybin and its use throughout the ages, and putting down misunderstandings and misinterpretation, or are the lion's share of people contacting you saying, "Hi, I've done my research. I know what I think I know what psilocybin can do for me. These are my issues. Let's go."
There is some hand holding, but most of the people who come to me are pretty well informed, actually. There's this whole psychedelic renaissance happening at the moment. and there's a lot of information out there now in some of our very establishment publications. Like The Economist did a leader with I think this was how long ago? This is about a year ago, but they did their lead story was on psilocybin mostly, but psychedelics generally as well, going through this whole like rescheduling process. It's in like Business Insider and the FT, all sort of kind of like pretty glowing reports about going to retreats and having very positive experiences, and about the benefits that these new therapeutic approaches can have. There's a lot of great good information out there. Obviously, Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. People in this space call it the pollinator effect. Had a huge impact in kind of like helping people, I suppose, understand what the psychedelic renaissance is, what that means, but also sort of get over that like hangover from the 60s and 70s. The 60s and 70s were remarkable in many respects, but it was also quite excessive and irresponsible in other respects as well. So there's been a whole, kind of a reframing process that's happening. So when people come to me, they are quite knowledgeable usually, but there's still, you still have to very much temper people's expectations. It's kind of framed as this big like healing event, and part of my role is to really, I guess, remind people that it's not just a single event. It's a whole process. It's very different from the biomedical model that we're used to, where you pop a pill every day that, very conveniently is this sugar-coated pill that you pop each day, convenient for the pharmaceutical companies that produce them. And that's a kind of numbing. It's a passive process. You're not really resolving anything. These experiences, you're diving deep into the emotional root. So it's and it requires, whereas the kind of biomedical model is passive, this is very active and requires, active participation before, during, after. So I really have to like help people see that it's a whole process. It's not this single event. It requires work, and these experiences, all they can really do really is to help, like maybe expedite a process, to catalyze a process, but it's not the process in itself. So I make that really clear up front. And obviously I have to make it clear as well that I'm not selling healing as well. Obviously, these experiences can be quite healing and like medicinal, if we want to put it that way. But it's like no one, I think, can really, like no one should ever promise that. I think it's irresponsible to promise that, because like the outcomes are so unpredictable. We're working with the psyche here. We're, the vastness of the psyche. So who knows what's going to happen? But yeah.
I think I one of my considerations was around life hacking and biohacking. Obviously, you'd be familiar with the concept, and I wonder how many people now are sort of going, okay, right, I read an article, I read a blog, I watched Fantastic Fungi, the documentary on Netflix. Okay, cool. I'm pretty sure a couple of journeys on mushrooms are going to fix me. Hi, Liam, can you fix me up, please, and heal me forthwith? Because I need some health hacking, psyche hacking. And it's a valid point you make there. I talk about this a lot to anyone who listen, in terms of the healing journey and how everything's a hack now. Hacking is just everywhere. And because we've so attention poor and time poor, and we're going through these, tiny devices, scrolling, for the micro moment we have, or we're sitting on the toilet or whatever. Okay, I need some healing, is it in my feed? And it's a totally different vibe when you really get into the healing journey. And people, I was actually on a podcast this morning where the interviewer, he's a therapist, a psychologist, so he gets it. And we were talking about the idea that people need to really understand that healing is a process. If you think about it, take me for example. What am I, 45 now? I only really kind of got super well 2 years ago. So it took me 43 years to really fuck it up. So am I then expecting to heal and to unlearn everything in 6 months, in 3 months? Of course not. It's a huge process. So I wondered how many people come at you like that and say, "Hi, give me the hero's dose."
The magic mushrooms. Some people may take literally.
Yeah.
And magically fix them.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the culture we live in, right? We want quick fixes, quick wins. And that's not how it works, and that's another thing that I have to make quite clear up front. As you said, it's a journey. So a big part of my process is helping people cultivate a sense of like compassionate curiosity to the journey, to the unfolding, and helping people, be curious about that and enjoy all that journey. And it's like a dance, it's like a tango, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. If those are the tango steps, I'm not sure. But yeah, that, but that's all part of it. Our egos have a very different timeline to a natural healing process. Our egos are like, now, and healing, wholeness, it's a lifelong journey. So let's see if we can like slow it down and relax and enjoy the ride, as it were. So I have to make that clear. But then with the biohacking, that's another whole conversation of like people, less so my clients. I think I have a certain pull towards certain types of people, I suppose. It's less kind of like hacking, but that's a whole other conversation of like, these substances, these sacred, in many respects, substances, or the process being sacred, being reduced to like productivity hacks with microdosing and stuff like that. How can we be more productive? How can we be better, economic units in the current model? So that's a whole other thing. And there's, I suppose, like tension between these like big experiences that are sacred, can be, and then these, the microdosing, which, the science around it for now is questionable, whether it works or whether it's, just a placebo effect. I mean, people say just a placebo effect, but I think the placebo effect points to something quite profound, this like inner healing intelligence within us. But whether it's anything beyond that, it seems like the jury's out with microdosing for now.
Have you read any Joe Dispenza work?
Haven't. I've seen talks of his. Haven't read anything as yet.
Yeah, he wrote something called "You Are the Placebo." Joe Dispenza is a pretty cool guy, actually, and he I think he was a chiropractor, wasn't he? And he sustained a really bad back injury and was told he was never going to heal himself, or rather, allopathic medicine was never going to heal him. So he got stuck straight into alternate therapies and meditation, and through this whole process, just happened upon the concept of neuroscience, neuroplasticity, epigenetics, a whole new world. And along that journey, incidentally healed his spine, walked again, even though I think they told him he never would. And so he talks about the placebo effect with reverence, as you inferred, because we do, and the science to show it, isn't there? We do have the ability to heal our own bodies. Okay? I know plenty of people who have done that right here. In fact, my meditation teacher here in Bali, he healed his own liver cancer through meditation. So yeah, that's interesting. I'm Yeah, you were talking about headlines, and I saw a couple of headlines this week. I know you saw them as well, but I'm interested in what's happening right now in the world with this sudden media positioning, this warm, fuzzy media positioning around psilocybin. Because, of course, as we know, 60s and 70s, the West discovered mushrooms in a big way, and LSD, obviously, and everyone went a bit nuts off the back of it, fighting against a hugely oppressive society in certain countries. Anyway, I know in the UK, it was very stiff upper lip and class-based. And so there was this explosion of people saying, no, do you know what? I'm not down with that. I'm actually going to take some psychedelics, and I'm checking out of England and Europe and the world. Actually, I'm checking out this dimension. I'm going somewhere else for a little while. And of course, it was criminalized. It was all criminalized and classified. And it's now all coming about again, isn't it? And I saw something which I think you might have shared as well. It was a Newsweek cover. It said, "Magic mushrooms may be the biggest advance in treating depression since Prozac." Whoa.
I mean, just the fact that they're equating magic mushrooms to Prozac.
What the?
And this kind of points to something, because we were talking about healing. Maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about what it is that you are helping people to heal from. Speaking of the Prozac, so when we talk about depression and this headline that Martin just read, magic mushrooms may be the biggest advance in depression since Prozac. I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with that headline, but you see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, trauma is something that you work with, isn't it, Liam? I know many people know my story, but I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. So I was super addicted to cocaine, high functioning. And we talk about alcoholism and addiction, and people talk about it in different ways. But my own experience was understanding, and actually part of my healing process was in understanding that they were merely symptoms, and they were symptoms of something far more deep, as you inferred earlier on. And I think this is something that I'd love for us all to talk a lot more about, and it's talking about the root of the issue, the core. Why do we have this mental illness? Why do we have this type of behavioral trait? Why are we narcissistic? Why are we abusive? So on and so forth. And of course, it's all linked to trauma.
Oh, I would love to. I mean, I've become such a trauma nerd. Honestly, like just any excuse to talk about trauma. I think it's so fascinating. It's so beautiful in a way as well. The other side of it, obviously, is trauma can be, of course, like horrific. And, I kind of like sometimes question the kind of post-traumatic growth line, because, sometimes people don't reach that, and sometimes it's just fucking awful, But I'll talk about trauma a little bit, and like how I frame trauma. So trauma for me is quite misunderstood. For me, it's anything that overwhelms our organism and our response to that overwhelm. So the overwhelm is anything that's too much, too fast, too soon, which means that, of course, trauma is those like big T traumas, like war scenes, rape, abuse, violence, stuff like that. But it's also little T traumas as well, like neglect, abandonment, parents denying our realities, bad breakups can be overwhelming. And it's, again, it's anything that overwhelms our organism. So it's also physical, it's whiplash, it's sports injuries, it's surgery as well. The body can't differentiate between rape and genital surgery. It just sees it as an attack. It's also very personal. So what overwhelms one person won't overwhelm another person. And it's not just like for the individual, like it can be, we can have cultural trauma as well, of course. Just think about how overwhelming systemic racism is, generations of it as well. And trauma is also inherited. We're seeing through the emerging science of epigenetics that trauma is, it can imprint on our gene expression, like the wrapper around the DNA. And it can be inherited. And we model our trauma. We model the trauma from our parents because they had traumatized parents and their parents were traumatized, and all the way back. So we model trauma, and we can actually inherit it on our gene expression as well. And so there's the body keeps the score, which I think is back at the top of the New York Times bestseller list now. And it's an academic book on trauma. So I think there's something quite telling when an academic book on trauma is, I mean, it's at the number one spot for like ages, I think. And now it's back up there. There's so many conferences on trauma at the moment. There's something very zeitgeisty about trauma happening, it seems. But there's a line that I came across recently. So where like the body keeps the score, but the mind hides the score. And that's kind of like how trauma works, the mechanics of it. So, our bodies. Yeah, would you like me to talk about like the mechanics of trauma? Because I think that's for me the most interesting thing, because I think it points to how we're actually like addressing trauma in the wrong way. Do you want me to talk about that?
For sure. And also, while you're on that, perhaps Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body. I don't know if you're familiar with that writing, but essentially it's one in the same. So he's talking about how we store trauma in the body.
Yeah. So I come from more like Peter Levine's model. So Peter Levine is probably probably arguably like the leading expert on trauma at the moment. He's like your favorite trauma person's favorite trauma person. So he sees overcoming trauma is primarily a physiological process, not a psychological one. So what his genius is that he reminds us that we're mammals, right? So, we've got this very sophisticated rational mind, this prefrontal cortex, but evolutionarily, that's quite a recent development. But our whole organisms, and the brain is just one part of that interconnected, interdependent series of systems. Our whole organism has evolved over millions of years to know how to instinctively heal like other mammals do. So he was observing mammals in the wild, and he was like, well, why do very few mammals exhibit traumatized behavior despite being constantly overwhelmed? And he realized that they know how to instinctively heal, and their very survival, of course, depends on their ability to do that, because they get overwhelmed and then, they need to return, they need to return out and look for food and socialize and, do all those things. And the way that they do it is they shake, they shake and tremor. So, and the whole mechanism behind that, when mammals and us, whenever we're overwhelmed, we generate all of this fight or flight survival energy, adrenaline, cortisol, stuff like that. And if we don't discharge it, like then or soon after, then we go into freeze, and all of that energy gets stuck into the body. And that's where you have like dissociation, depression. In fact, like most of our unwanted symptoms, I think, are better explained by that stuck freeze energy in the body. And we don't shake and tremor because we've been socialized out of it, because shaking has associations with cowardice or being out of control. And we hate being out of control because that's a few steps away from death, So like our rational mind gets in the way of a healing process often. So, I see healing, actually, the healing process as like really like tuning down that rational mind. So that's a very different approach to psychotherapy, which is very like, staying with the story, saying, trauma impacts the limbic system and it impacts the body. So you can't actually reach it by talking and thinking about it. You need a deeper thing. So that's the kind of like body keeps the score. And then the mind hides the score is like whenever we're overwhelmed, our, protective parts of the psyche come in and make sure that we don't access the memory of that traumatic event. And that's where like internal family systems is a really powerful new therapeutic model, new 80s, newish. So internal family systems is a really powerful therapeutic model at accessing those parts. And, rather than being top down, which is most psychotherapy, which is like, going in through the mind and all those protective stories that you just have to wade through until you get to the emotional root. Internal family systems is bottom up, and you go in through the body, which is a more direct route, it seems, into the emotional root. And then you work with those protectors, you get them on side, you witness them, they kind of have their own personalities, they need to be witnessed. And then, they learn that they can lower down their weapons and grant access to the exiles that need healing. So for me, like body keeps a score, mind hides a score. Somatic experiencing and internal family systems are really powerful ways at addressing those things. And like internal family systems, again, is a very different model from traditional psychotherapy, because it's like, part. So it's the idea that we don't have, like, there isn't one singular Liam. I'm made of like our minds, bodies. There's a multiplicity to it, a whole stadium full of parts, and they each have their own role and personality. But at the core, kind of the central idea to internal family systems, that everyone has a capital S self, this essential self that has this drive towards wholeness, healing, and happiness. It's very spiritual idea. It's an evidence-based model, so they researched it and it works, but it's underpinned by very spiritual, shamanic ideas almost. And I really love it when those worlds come together. So this self, the most important relationship in internal family systems is the relationship between the client and their own self. And that's the thing, the self is what heals. Anyway, they're both trauma-informed approaches, but I think, when we define trauma as anything that overwhelms us, I think that really broadens it out. And I think rather than seeing like people as sick and, the therapist as being like the healed one and the one who's, that sort of power asymmetry, like, because we're all on that spectrum, right? We're all fucked up on the spectrum. I think it's much better at seeing as like, overwhelming things happened. Our minds and our bodies created very natural, understandable, automatic responses to it. And there's a way to undo it. And we're all kind of like just walking each other home, that Ram Dass thing of like walking each other home, having that understanding and helping each of us, overcome our traumas. But I really feel like we don't need an expert to analyze us. We need someone to support a process where healing comes from within. So that's how I'm sort of framing it.
I couldn't agree more. I feel we are our own healer, and I think I don't know how it happened, but society's got to a point suddenly where we have this savior complex vibe going on, where everybody's just waiting to be saved in any way, shape, or form from all manner of things. We seem to be abrogating responsibility for our own sovereignty, our own health, our own mental health, physical health. It's all being outsourced, and fundamentally, you're right. I think we have the tools within us to do all of those things and more. We've just forgotten them. And actually, you use the word shamanic. Actually, in our introduction, I referred to you as a modern day shaman. I hope you don't mind.
I'm somewhere in between a shaman and a clinical researcher, and I'm neither of those things, but maybe somewhere in the middle. Just one quick point on the healing coming from within us as well. Like, it definitely does. Like, we have this inner healing intelligence, this capital S self, and it is healing. I would say we also do need others as well. I think like it's both and. We are like extraordinarily interdependent and interconnected. And I think sometimes like healing journeys can be a product of this like Western individualism that sees it as this like Lone Ranger path, and it's about my healing, my path, my journey, and anyone who gets in the way of it, be damned. So I think that can go to that extreme.
I think it's a fine line, isn't it? Ultimately, I think my own experience, anyway, I can't speak for anybody else, but from my own experience, I was helped on the ladder. I was helped on the ladder first by a therapist, a traditional therapist. But really, my big sort of linchpin moment was help from my brother, and that sent me off on my path. But he didn't even really need to say it. essentially, when I began to lean on him too much, because he'd walked his path, he'd done his own healing journey. It's not for me to share the details of that on this. I would sort of lean on him and ask him, more and more, and he sort of, I could see him sort of going, look, I planted the seeds, but you got to water your own garden, buddy. And I really, really appreciated that to this day. However, of course, as you open yourself up to that vulnerability, as you open your heart and mind, or actually put mind in the back seat of the Earth rover and let consciousness do some interesting driving for a change, that's when you suddenly become open to reaching out to a Liam or to a Chris or to a Martin or to a mum or a dad or a best friend. I think, certainly speaking from my own experience, had I not had a network of carers, if you like, I think I probably would have died. There was a time where I nearly killed myself, and I think actually having a couple of people around me were the people that helped me not do that. They didn't know I was going to kill myself, but it is what it is. This might be an interesting time so we have as part of our team a Manchu priest, and he's so it's a Balinese priest, and he's called Ketut. And we were talking to Ketut yesterday about trauma and people holding on to negative experiences in their mind.
Yeah.
Might be worth me sharing that.
That is a perfect thing. Yeah, you really teed it up nicely, Liam, talking about getting out of your mind and being in the body, and also connecting the worlds of modern therapy and scientific research with maybe ancient traditions and more shaman type vibes. So yeah, Ketut, we specifically asked him, and this is going to be part of our weekly segment that's called, what are we calling it? Thoughts for Ketut.
I think it's called Thoughts for Ketut.
I think we're calling it Thoughts for Ketut. But we asked, what would you say to someone who's experienced a traumatic event and they can't stop replaying that event in their mind, or they can't get it out of their mind? So Martin, you want to go ahead and play his response?
Here we go. Check it out and we'll talk about it.
Thoughts from Ketut. Yeah, the first thing I have to tell them is about breathing, and then try to be in your body. Like make your breathing guiding you, that bring your energy down, cutting your head, because sometimes the energy stuck in that head, because bring you worry, everything that make you more sick. You should not get out from that. So that's why the more important is you to get out from that is through the breath, and bring you down. And normally, if you can walk, you can go to the nature, walking, just like bring you to the earth. This is my advice.
Ketut. He's like our Balinese Yoda.
He has such a nice voice, doesn't he?
The guy just exudes this wonderful feeling of like love and calm and peace. Yeah, he's a real special guy, isn't he?
Yeah, you get it from his voice.
There were some similarities, right? So he's saying, get out of your head. He obviously his go-to is meditation. So he's talking about the breath. Get out of the head, breathe, and on the most basic level, breathe and get out into the nature. Being two fundamental and very simple and doable things that anybody can do as part of a daily practice. We're going to talk about meditation every week on this podcast in some way, shape, or form, because I practice it religiously, and many people I know do, and I know for a fact it's super good for us all. So we're going to talk about it. But so, what did you think about Ketut's perspective there? Some resonance?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, breathing, there's so much healing potential in the breath, and we're not particularly good breathers. Especially when we're stressed or overwhelmed, we breathe into the chest, very shallow breathing, and deep abdominal breathing just helps to unlock that. Part of my process is coaching people how to breathe properly, because it really is the thing that helps support the experience. One of the things that helps support the experience, when taking psychedelics. So yeah, breathing, cutting off the head is that wachuma, that getting the head out, and connecting to nature is one way of doing that. Obviously it relaxes the nervous system. It connects us to something bigger than us. It's beautiful. Earthing has all sorts of benefits. For me, like getting out of the head, singing and dancing have become extraordinarily medicinal for me. Because trauma energetically, like overwhelm or trauma is like this. It's this kind of like closed fit. You're like this. You've got tunnel vision, and if I start to get too heady, it can kind of just sort of like unlock that, and just moving with it. And I mean, one thing I'd say about being stuck in thoughts as well, because that is a very common trauma response. In somatic experiencing, it's called riveting. So, whenever we're overwhelmed, we're kind of like, we're stuck in that freeze state, right? So we're actually frozen in that time, in that moment. And, things might, we may be, objectively safe, not in any danger, but certain things may remind us of that danger or whatever. So we're still on a kind of nervous system level, mind, body, riveted to that overwhelming event. So for me, again, like it comes back to like shaking, tremoring, because our nervous systems are going like fuck, 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 So we need to like discharge that energy. And it's a very and it's an that shaking and tremoring, it's an automatic process. Like you don't need to think about it. In fact, you need to like turn down the thinking mind in order to kickstart that process. And psychedelics can quite effectively turn that volume down. But then, it's about moving, singing, being with people, being in nature, breathing, meditating, realizing we're not our thoughts. They're just objects that come in and out of consciousness. All those things.
All of the psilocybin journeys that I've been on and ceremonies that I've been in a lot. I always tend to find there's a phase in the journey where I begin to move. So I find myself doing yoga, actually, more often than not, yoga or qigong, which is interesting because the first time I found myself doing yoga was during an ayahuasca journey, and I'd never done yoga. So that was kind of weird. And it's a wonderful thing. So actually, when you're with the medicine like that and you start to move, you feel yourself releasing blocked energy. You fundamentally relax and release. And actually, certainly in my experience, I find myself relaxing muscles, micro muscle release, muscles that you think you're releasing when you're sitting down or lying down, but you're actually not, because as we all know, there are layers and layers and layers of tension. It's only when you get into deep meditation or a shavasana, for example, after yoga, where you're reminded usually by the yogi to even just plant your spine or plant your coccyx on into the ground, melt into the ground is what you're encouraged to do. And it's only when you find yourself in these specific situations that you realize you are holding tension in your body, which is linked to a trauma. So, okay. What's your thought then on the fact that mushrooms have been around since the dinosaurs, as have all other plant medicines, and of course have been criminalized and kept away from people. But now the pharmaceutical companies are onto this, and they're synthesizing this and turning it into a little pill. So now suddenly the media is talking about how accessible it is. I saw something else online from Motherboard, which is the Tech Vice platform, and they were saying that psychedelics are $1 billion business, but no one can agree who should control it. I couldn't help but chuckle. I'm like, how the hell are you going to control the mycelial network? It's bigger than you.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, you don't find trees going, yeah, exactly, like trees wondering, like, who the hell is going to control this network? You know, it's.
Yeah, I wonder what your perspective was. That I'm not trying to be all anti-establishment here, but I think it's my point sings to an obvious truth, and that is that these medicines have been around for thousands, if not millions, of years. They were once put in a naughty box where no one was allowed to use them to open their minds, to heal themselves, and now suddenly. Now it's going to be available in a pill form owned by a pharmaceutical company. This stuff's going to start getting whacked out on a daily basis all around the world. And of course, as a result, we've got countries and American states currently, one by one, legalizing psilocybin, aren't they?
Yeah, it is an interesting thing. I mean, the same thing happened with marijuana.
Yeah.
You know, it started off as recreation or as medically legal and became recreational. And there was a certain debate about ownership and about actually the quality of the marijuana and what this commercial influence would have on it. So, yeah, I mean, definitely curious to get your thoughts on that, Liam, as far as how that would affect you and your practice.
Yeah. Just bolting another question onto that, how do you select the psilocybin that you work with?
So the first question of like that tension between these two worlds, right? So yeah, I kind of frame it like on the one extreme, you've got the like idealistic hippies, and then on the other hand, you've got the evil capitalists. And as with most things, like the middle way is the way, right? And they both have good points. So, the idealistic hippies, they're saying rightly that these experiences are sacred, that they're, a lot of them are just natural as well, that they certainly shouldn't be criminalized. It's ludicrous. The whole war on drugs was, it's on record saying it was political. It was to clamp down on two groups of people that were threatening at the time, Black people and hippies. The Black Panther movement and the counterculture movement. So, I mean, that's on record. That's not a conspiracy theory. So, yeah, it was, and the whole war on drugs has been a huge failure in terms of helping people with addiction or crime related to drugs and reducing use. It's been a massive success in its actual purpose, which was, criminalizing those two groups. So, yeah, so there's, you've got, these substances have been around for a very long time and are sacred and, have this whole like framework around them, in like with mushrooms, like the Mazatec, especially in Mexico, and it's ceremonial and it's community based and it's all these things that we're not very good at doing in the West. So yeah, they're like, we need to have that model as well as part of the picture. And then you've got the evil capitalists on the other extreme saying, well, these are new medicines and we have the model that we have in the West, which means that if these are going to be, because, this is much like a deeper process. Psilocybin, these new psychedelic medicines are being framed as a therapeutic process, in a much deeper way than weed is. So, it necessarily has to go through a much more stringent process with the FDA, this whole rescheduling process. And that's extraordinarily expensive and just requires a ton of money. So, that argument is saying that we can't actually bring these new medicines to market without using the capitalistic model. And then there's an argument on that side as well that business can be a vehicle at disseminating these new medicines. So they both have points. For me, the main thing is like the kind of, and I think they'll coexist as well. So you have like the McDonald's of the market, which is like the Compass Pathways or whatever, MindMed. And then you have the farmers markets, which are more like guys like me and everything in between. And there'll be something for everybody. They have to coexist.
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be an interesting. I think it's going to be a really interesting space to watch. But from my perspective, I'm just chuffed that it's on the agenda, because I don't mind admitting my own healing journey, and certainly my battle with addiction and trauma was hugely helped by psychedelics. Hasten to add, not in this country, whilst I was in Central America, where they're legal. But ayahuasca, wachuma, DMT, and psilocybin all played a huge part in helping me. And this was all in guided ceremonial circles where it was responsibly handled by some amazing people who are very close to my heart now. I mean, you look at, as you say, Peter Levine, but also Gabor Mate, who's a famous psychologist, isn't he? Who uses plant medicines and ayahuasca to treat addiction. Lots of people say an ayahuasca journey it can be likened to 10 years of therapy. So from my perspective, I'm really happy it's on the agenda, and I guess fair enough if it's going to turn up as a synthesized pill, as long as it's being prescribed in the right way. This would be another question I had for you, though, of course. Do you worry that we're going to get to a situation where I could go to a psychiatrist and say, I'm depressed, and instead of getting my Prozac or whatever psychiatrist, whatever pharmaceuticals they give you, I get a prescription for psilocybin, and then I just go home and take psilocybin? Feels to me like we're losing a real controlled, and as you mentioned earlier, sort of almost sacred ceremonial perspective and respect.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the nuance, and I think the main issue for me with these two camps is like, who's capturing the narrative, who's owning the narrative. And what would be a real shame is if that biomedical model captures the narrative and like, this is the way to do this experience, and it strips the experience, strips the process of its sacredness. That would be a real shame. But maybe there's an argument that, just like people maybe have a Starbucks and then oh, I want something a bit more like, a bit more sophisticated. Maybe it will open these sort of big companies like Compass Pathways will open the gateway to people, and it will bring, it will help guide people towards more. Like a different model. So, maybe there's that argument as well. But that is an issue. Yeah, that is an issue that everyone in this space, myself and others, are concerned about, that, are we, and there's an argument as well against the kind of capitalistic model that, is this model the right model to disseminate these experiences, when many argue that the sort of like the capitalistic, hyper individualistic model where we're encouraged to constantly compete and compare, those things that led to a lot of our mental health issues to begin with, is that the right model to disseminate these new experiences? So that's, I think, a legitimate argument as well. But it's also worth keeping in mind that these companies, they're working on very specific patient groups. So for psilocybin at the moment, it's treatment-resistant depression and major depressive disorder. MDMA, it's PTSD. So when they're rescheduled, it will only be targeting those groups. And maybe over a long time, it will be broadened out. But it's worth keeping that in mind as well, that, once these go through the rescheduling process, and it's not like it's going to be opened up to everybody. That may come, but that's way, way down the line.
I suppose I'm just thinking ahead. My own experiences with psychedelics has been very community-based. So, and every shaman you talk on the planet would say that set and setting are two of the most important aspects of this kind of journey. And I both of you guys, I know, have seen Fantastic Fungi, the Netflix documentary. Excuse me, but they talk about the same thing there, that the part of the experience is part of the healing process is who you're with and where you are. And of course, that sings to exactly what you're doing with this new consultancy, because you are that guide, which I think is epic. And I suppose, are you getting the idea already that that there are more and more of you popping up? Is it is the guidance? I don't want to say market because it devalues it, but it is the guidance industry suddenly in exponential growth?
Yeah, there are more retreats and guides popping up, which is good in some respects, but also presents issues as well because it's not regulated, so it's kind of Wild West. I'm a member of the Guild of Guides, which is a fairly new organization in the Netherlands that is we're working to promote, there's a code of conduct, but also, promoting, the advocacy of safe, responsible guidance and what that means. So, no promising healing, no saying we will treat your depression, definitely none of that. Because you're seeing microdosing services, promising healing with microdosing. It's just you shouldn't do that. It's irresponsible. It's unethical. There are things like the Guild of Guides coming up now. There's a lot of well-intentioned people in this space whose hearts are definitely in the right place, but don't understand trauma, don't understand the psyche, don't understand basic therapeutic approaches and models. And they just had a few healing experiences or positive experiences themselves. I think they're ready to hold space for others. It's a whole, it requires a lot of personal work to do this work. There's all the kind of intellectual stuff, understanding case studies that I've been doing and understanding therapeutic models, internal family systems, somatic experiencing, Jungian psychology, Grothian psychology, reading all the scientific papers and protocols and, all of that sort of stuff. Experiential, obviously, working with the substances that I'm working with extensively. But really importantly is me having gone through my own deep personal process with my own internal family systems and somatic experiencing therapy and meditation and yoga and, time and space and, I do men's group work as well. All of this sort of stuff, because these are very sensitive, delicate spaces to hold, and you need to be aware of what you're bringing into that space. There's a lot of potential for transference, countertransference, projections. So if the guide isn't aware of his or her own processes, then that has the potential to create all sorts of issues. And we're seeing it, right? Because it is the Wild West. Unfortunately, there are cases of seems predominantly men making sexual advances or not respecting boundaries, let's say, in that space, which is, just, especially if we're working with sexual trauma, all that sort of stuff. So going through deep personal process, doing our own work, shadow work, whatever, however you want to frame it, is really important. So it's both an exciting time and a time to pause and be okay, we need to be really careful, because all it's going to take are a few people, one or two big fuck ups basically, to undo a lot of the work that people in this space have been working so hard to again recondition people's or reframe people's attitudes towards psychedelics. It's been done very slowly and safely. So people in this space who take this very seriously are we need to be careful. We need to be careful.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the guild is a wonderful idea. But I, as you alluded, everyone's a life coach, right? So
Yeah, especially here in Bali.
yeah, we have our fair share of DIY shaman. So as you may or may not know, another weekly segment of How to Die Happy is Be My Guest. So up on our website, we have a little page with the list of forthcoming guests, and there's a link to a really cool little voicemail feature that people can use. So we're encouraging people to leave messages for the guest. So you get to be their guest for a very short while. And we've got a couple of questions from audience members. So we're gonna go through a couple. Still got a bit of time, haven't we? So
We do indeed.
okay.
Be my guest. Let's talk, my friend. Let's talk, my friend. This is not the end.
Man, I love this. Dwayne Forrest, everyone.
Dwayne
Wonderful.
Forrest. Gotta give a shout out to
wonderful
Dwayne.
musician who did all of our music for nothing but peace and love. So thanks, Dwayne. Question number 1.
Hi guys, this is Pete from the UK. I'm interested, please, to know, what is the active compound in psilocybin and how does it work? What does it actually do to the brain?
So psilocybin breaks down into psilocin. That is the compound. And yeah, it works on the serotonin system, specifically the 5-HT2P receptor. And what essentially it does is it reduces blood flow, or deactivates the default mode network, or reduces blood flow to the default mode network. And the default mode network is a brain hub that is associated with the ego. So that sense of self, that sense of I, sense of personality, continuity. But the ego is also a set of defenses as well. And that acts as a filter. So what it accepts, it puts into conscious awareness, and what it doesn't accept, it puts into the shadow, the unconscious. And depth psychology and modern neuroscience both show us that the vast majority of the psyche is unconscious. So by dissolving that filter, by deactivating that filter of the ego, the default mode network, it just allows unconscious material to surface. And that's where a lot of the therapeutic potential can be as well. Because that Jungian idea of the shadow, these things that we're unaware of, that's really what the shadow is. All the things that we don't identify with, whether good or bad. It could be painful experiences, it could be our lighter qualities, our playfulness, our love, our silliness, whatever, tenderness. So they're just things that are in our shadow, and we can bring them to the surface to witness. Because those shadow aspects are controlling us. They impact what we think, what we believe, our belief systems, who we're attracted to, who we're not attracted to, situations that we're drawn to, whatever it is. So, that's the path of the Jungian, again, idea of individuation, of, reaching wholeness. It's bringing all those unconscious parts into conscious awareness. So it's, that's a big part of my process as well, helping people realize that, we all have a shadow. We all have these parts of us that we don't identify with. And it's, again, back to cultivating that sense of open, compassionate curiosity to meet that, to really welcome those things. That's the mechanism. Dissolving that filter, the default mode network, bringing stuff to the surface. That's what it does to the brain. Obviously, there's the whole body element.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Okay. Nice. Okay. I'm gonna stick with the same guest. Actually, he's left a couple of questions, so let's hear from Pete again.
I'm guessing it's different for everyone and maybe case specific, but is there a general idea of what to expect from the psilocybin experience?
Whoa, I can answer that one. But go.
No, basic short answer. Because, so Stanislav Grof is a guy who I've studied extensively, because he has overseen more psychedelic sessions than anyone else. He's had a 60-year career studying psychedelics as part of a therapeutic process. He's in his 90s now. Legend, Stanislav Grof. I recommend everyone check him out if they haven't already. And he frames psychedelics as including psilocybin, as non-specific amplifiers of the psyche, which means that it's bringing whatever's in the psyche to the surface to be witnessed. And again, the psyche is vast. So we're always working with, our own individual psychic material. So it's always going to be unique. So it's going to be different from person to person, and even with the same person, it's going to be different experience to experience. As you may have experienced yourself, we can also, so it's, it can have the shadow, the unconscious parts that are related to our biography, but it can have transpersonal, that's kind of, the Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, that our psyche isn't just the personal unconscious, it's the collective unconscious that kind of connects us all. So it can tap us, help us tap into that, beyond our concepts of space, time, all of that sort of stuff. So it can be literally there's a whole universe's worth of potential experiences. Common ones are stuff from your personal history coming to the surface to be witnessed. So there's that. You can have all sorts of birthing experiences, like being reborn, stuff like that. You can, the mystical experience, quite sometimes not a common experience, but what can happen is that you can have that sense of unity, of being connected to everything else, and that points to various ideas of and that can feel like for people quite a religious, spiritual experience, like that becoming one with everything. People say it's like God, and God being the closest word, not angry bearded man in the sky wagging his finger, but God being the best word we have to describe this spiritual experience of oneness. That idea that beyond the material world, beyond the quantum world, we have this subquantum, infinite, timeless, formless, ocean of consciousness or something like it. And the unified field kind of points to that, and God kind of points to that, and consciousness kind of points to that. And and the Hindus have been onto this for a long time, obviously. It's interesting for me to see the world, and the Buddhists, and the world of spirituality and science overlapping now with quantum science, kind of corroborating a lot of these ideas that have been around for millennia. But this idea that there's this common ground that things spring from and return to. But different things from psychology, philosophy, quantum relativistic physics, they all kind of point to that. So you can have a direct experience of it.
Yeah, a flavor of it. And I've talked to a number of monks, if you like, Buddhists and Hindus who will, and I've talked to them about plant medicine, and they will say you can get to the same state through meditation, but they will admit that's through a very, very deep and constant practice. In fact, all of the masters from all around the world, and actually in all the ages, they all use some very common practices. It is breath centered, of course, breath and meditation, but they will admit that it's not going to come overnight like that. So I'm not suggesting that psychedelics are a hack in that regard, but they certainly they're like a laser cut key, aren't they? More often than not in the right setting.
It's the way I frame it is there's different ways up the spiritual mountain. religions, spiritual traditions, whatever they are. They all kind of like came from the same source for me, and they all end at the same place. And they're just different ways of going up the mountain. What psychedelics can do is like a helicopter trip for a brief visit to the top. You'll be like, oh, okay, like that's the point. And it's not like you still need to go up the mountain, because that's how you learn the lessons. You don't learn the lessons of that great journey, that great hike by just briefly visiting it. You still need to go through that process, but it can at least give you experience of like, oh, so that's what it is. Right. Got it. Now I know.
Now I got to do the work. And sticking with your mountain metaphor, these things are all best done with a Sherpa, which of course is Liam. Well, I could talk about this with you until Christmas 2025, but we've had more than an hour of your time, Liam. So it is with regret that we have to call this a day. Man, this is our first episode. We're riffing this. We're making it all up. We've had some technical issues because of a submarine chopping the fiber optics up in the ocean somewhere around here. So thank you so much for your patience, but also thanks for your time and energy, Liam. I really do enjoy talking to you. We've had a number of these conversations, and I could just sit listening to you for a long time. Next time I need to write some of this stuff down, because you give me some more points of people to check out and watch. But for anybody who wants to know more about Liam, you can find out on our website. There's also a link to his website, Brighter Pathways. So he's London based, but quite obviously due to regulations, the psilocybin work is done in another country. Nevertheless, he's in London, and he can chat to you presumably via the miracle of the internet, like we've done today. And yeah, thanks, Liam. Been epic.
Very welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Liam. It was a pleasure. We do want to give you the chance just to leave people with any closing thoughts. Maybe since the name of the show is How to Die Happy. I'm just
Good
riffing
point.
this. I don't know, but maybe you could tell us what makes you happy, Liam. What do you think?
Lots of things. Yeah. Dancing, singing, being with friends, community, having those loving relationships where you can just reveal the full spectrum of your being. I think those relationships are so treasured and sacred. So for anyone who has those people in their lives, I really, encourage people to really, treasure that, and maybe drop them a line, just letting them know how much you appreciate them. So, I think I'll close on that.